A joint checking account that read "joint tenancy with right of survivorship" went dark 7 days after one of its two owners died. The surviving spouse was legally the sole owner of every dollar in it the moment her husband stopped breathing. By the following Friday, her debit card was declined at a pharmacy counter. The auto-pay for the mortgage bounced, and the balance she could see on her phone was money she could no longer touch. That is not a horror story from a badly run bank. In today's system, that is the normal case. The exception is the survivor who sails through the first week without a single interruption. Consider a composite survivor. Call her the archetype, because no real name belongs here. 61 years old, married 34 years. Financially careful in exactly the way personal finance is supposed to reward. The couple held their primary account jointly, on purpose, because everyone from her father to her banker had told her the same thing. If one of you dies, the other one just keeps going. The account has both names. Survivorship is right there in the title. Nothing has to go through probate. That advice was correct in 1995. Her husband died on a Sunday. On Monday, the funeral home did what funeral homes now do electronically as a matter of routine. It filed the death. By midweek, that death had propagated through data systems that did not exist when her father gave his advice. By Thursday, her bank had matched a death record against the Social Security number attached to their shared account. By Friday, the account was flagged and access was suspended pending verification, not for the deceased's half, but for the whole thing. Her rent money, her paycheck deposit, her emergency cash, all of it sat behind a hold she had not requested and could not immediately lift. Notice the sequence, because the sequence is the entire point. She did nothing wrong. She missed no paperwork. She was not slow. The lockout arrived precisely because the system was fast. Faster than she was. Faster than her grief. Faster than any call she could place to a branch that would tell her, apologetically, that the freeze was automatic and that a supervisor could not simply wave it off. Here is the collision at the center of this video. Legally, the money became hers the instant he died. The right of survivorship did exactly what the law promises. Title passed to her, cleanly, with no court involved. And yet the operational reality, the part where money actually moves, where cards work and bills clear, ran on a completely different track. Legal ownership and banking access are two separate machines. For decades they moved at roughly the same slow pace, so nobody noticed the gap. Now one machine sprints and the other still walks, and the survivor falls into the space between them. The question this video exists to answer is blunt. If the money is legally hers the moment he dies, why can she be locked out of it by Friday? Why does the single most reassuring phrase in estate planning, right of survivorship, fail to keep the lights on in the 1 week it was designed for? The answer is not incompetence at her bank. It is not a clerical error that a firmer phone call would have fixed. The lockout was not a mistake by one bank. It was the system working exactly as designed. And to see why, you have to go back to the world where this exact death would have cost her nothing. Before any of this became automatic, a death moved through the financial system at the speed of paper, and paper is slow, forgetful, and easy to outrun. Walk back to the early 1990s, when the advice she inherited was written. A man dies on a Sunday. His widow drives to the bank the following week, sits across from a manager who has known the family for years, and presents a certified death certificate. A physical document, embossed, obtained from a county office that typed it up and mailed it out over several days. The bank does not have that certificate until she hands it over. Until that moment, as far as the institution is concerned, nothing has changed. The joint account keeps working, the debit card keeps clearing, the direct deposit keeps landing. That was not a loophole, it was the design. The system was reactive. It waited for the survivor to come to it, on her schedule, with her documents, at whatever pace grief and logistics allowed. And because the account read joint tenancy with right of survivorship, the certificate she eventually produced did not freeze the money. It simply removed the deceased's name and left her as sole owner of an account that had never stopped functioning. The legal machine and the banking machine moved at the same unhurried speed, arm in arm, both waiting on the same piece of embossed paper. Consider what that slowness bought her: time to breathe, time to bury him before she had to think about money. Time to keep paying the mortgage with a card that still worked while she figured out the rest. The gap between he died and the bank knows he died could stretch for weeks. And in that gap, the survivor's liquidity was never in question. She was inconvenienced by paperwork, not stranded by it. This is the historical parallel that matters, because it is the exact inverse of today. In the old world, the danger to a survivor came at the end of the process. Probate disputes, contested wills, heirs fighting over an estate months or years later. The front end, the first week, was the safe part. The money kept moving precisely because no one had told the machines to stop it. Death reporting was a manual act the survivor initiated, which meant the survivor controlled the timing of the one event that could interrupt her cash. The turning point is a specific one. For most of the 20th century, the Social Security Administration's Death Master file and the reporting behind it ran on batch cycles and mailed forms. A death might not register in federal systems for weeks or months. The infrastructure to report a death within days did not yet exist at scale, and the funeral home was not yet a node in a real-time data network. The survivor was the messenger, and a messenger can be delayed. That single fact that a human being had to physically carry the news to the institution is what made the old playbook safe. Every reassurance her father gave her, the other one just keeps going, rested on it. Right of survivorship handled the legal title. The survivor's own slowness handled the liquidity. Together they gave her a cushion measured in weeks. The consequence is simple to state and easy to underestimate. The advice was never wrong. It was accurate for a system in which the bank learned of a death only when the survivor chose to tell it. That world was coherent. The title protected ownership, the paper protected access, and the two never contradicted each other. Everything about that slow, forgiving process depended on one thing the banks no longer have: time. And there is a number that measures exactly how much time they lost: weeks. That was the average lag between a death and its appearance in federal systems for most of the 20th century. A death might not register in the Social Security Administration's records for 4 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer. Hold that number, because everything the old playbook promised was quietly financed by it. Then measure what replaced it. Today, a death filed by a funeral home can reach federal and downstream commercial death databases in 1 to 3 business days. The lag did not shrink by a little. It collapsed by an order of magnitude, from a matter of weeks to a matter of days. That is the whole structural shift in a single comparison, and it can be dated. The pivot runs through the machinery behind the Death Master file. For decades, the DMF was assembled from mailed forms and batch cycles, paper feeding a system that updated on its own unhurried schedule. Beginning in the mid-2000s and expanding aggressively after 2011, the SSA built out electronic death registration, a system that lets funeral homes, medical examiners, and state vital records offices file a death digitally at the point of origin in near real time. By the early 2010s, most states had EDR live, and a majority of deaths were being reported electronically. The report that once traveled by mail now travels by wire. Here is what that number hides. A viewer hears death reporting got faster and files it under bureaucratic housekeeping. The government modernized a database. Good for them. That framing misses the consequence entirely. Speed in a reporting system is not neutral. It changes who controls the timing of the single event that can freeze a survivor's cash. In the paper era, the survivor was the messenger, and a messenger sets her own pace. In the electronic era, the funeral home is the messenger, and it files as a matter of routine, often within 24 hours of taking custody of the body, before the survivor has chosen a casket, let alone thought about her checking account. So recalculate the old advice against the new clock. The other one just keeps going. Was never a statement about law, it was a statement about lag. It worked because the gap between he died and the bank knows he died was wide enough to drive a survivor's entire first month through. Right of survivorship handled the title. The weeks of reporting delay handled the liquidity. Remove the delay and you have not removed a minor inconvenience. You have removed the load-bearing wall the whole reassurance stood on. Now the arithmetic of the week runs in the opposite direction. Death on Sunday, electronic filing by Monday or Tuesday. The record propagates into the SSA's file, and from there into the commercial death verification databases that banks subscribe to, services that exist precisely to flag accounts against fresh death records for fraud prevention. By Wednesday or Thursday, an institution can match a death flag to a Social Security number on a shared account. The freeze lands on Friday. The certified paper death certificate the survivor is still waiting on from the county. The document the old system required before anything happened may not arrive for another week or two. The verification that used to trigger the process now trails behind it. Read that sequence carefully, because it inverts the entire logic of survivorship planning. The event that once came last, official confirmation of death reaching the bank, now comes first. It arrives before the death certificate, before probate is even a question. Before the survivor has made a single financial decision, the machines learn of the death before the paperwork that proves it exists in her hands. The measurable fact is this: the interval that protected survivors did not erode gradually. It was engineered away, on a datable timeline, by a system built for an entirely legitimate purpose that had nothing to do with her. Faster death reporting stops fraud. It also strands widows. Both are true, and only one made the brochure. The old world gave the survivor weeks of cushion. The new world gives her days, and sometimes not even that. Once death reporting collapsed from weeks to days, the freeze arrived before the paperwork did. A joint account does not stop working because someone forgot to update it. It stops working because a machine was told correctly that one of its two owners is dead, and that machine cannot tell the difference between the survivor and a fraud. That is the mechanism at the center of the freeze, and it is worth taking apart piece by piece, because the instinct of a financially careful person is to assume a hold this severe must be an error. It is not. It is the design working as intended. Start with what the bank actually sees. A shared checking account is not, to the institution's software, two people gently co-owning money. It is a single record attached to identifiers, account number, routing number, and, critically, the Social Security numbers of everyone on it. When a fresh death record enters the commercial verification database the bank subscribes to, the system runs a match. It compares death records against the Social Security numbers on active accounts. A hit means one of the humans attached to this money is now dead. The software does not read the account title. It does not parse, quote, joint tenancy with right of survivorship. It sees a live account linked to a deceased person's identity, and it does the one thing it was built to do. It stops the money from moving until a human being verifies who is now entitled to it. Now hold that against how the survivor understands the same account. To her, the title is a promise. Survivorship means the money became hers, whole and undivided, the instant her husband died. Legally, she is right. But legal title and operational access are answering two different questions. The law asks, who owns this money now? The bank's fraud system asks, is the person about to move this money authorized to move it? And are they even still alive? Those questions used to have the same answer at the same speed. They no longer do. Deepen it, and the cruelty of the mechanism becomes clear. The freeze is not partial. The software cannot surgically isolate the deceased's half and leave the survivors untouched, because in a true joint account, there are no halves. Every dollar belonged fully to both. So when the death flag lands, it lands on the entire balance. Her paycheck, that direct deposited on Wednesday, the emergency fund she built over a decade, the money she deposited yesterday from her own employer. All of it is now sitting inside an account the system has quarantined against a dead man's Social Security number. The very feature that made joint titling attractive, the seamless commingling of two lives into one pool, is what makes the whole pool freezable by a single death. The reason it locks the moment he dies rather than the moment probate concludes is the reason the entire video keeps circling back to. Fraud prevention rewards speed. A death record is the single most valuable signal a bank can have, because a dead person's identity is the raw material of financial fraud, accounts drained, benefits stolen, cards run up in the weeks after a death, precisely because criminals know the survivor is distracted. So the system is tuned to act on death records fast and ask questions later. Freezing first and verifying second is not a bug the bank apologizes for. It is the entire protective posture. The survivor is simply the collateral. The posture does not distinguish from a thief. So the loop closes here. A legally co-owned account stops working the moment one owner dies, because the machine that moves the money was never built to honor the title. It was built to protect the money from the dead. It cannot tell that the person locked out is the person it is supposedly protecting. That is why the reassuring phrase fails in the exact week it was meant for. And the frozen savings were only the first of 3 things happening to her money at once. What lands in the survivor's account in the days after a death, and what quietly leaves it? Because while the frozen savings are sitting behind a hold, a second set of numbers is still moving, and not all of it is moving toward her. Return to the composite widow, the archetype, no real name attached. Her frozen checking account is only the still water. The current is the money in motion, the deposits scheduled to arrive that week, and the withdrawals scheduled to pull out. She had spent 34 years building a household that ran on autopilot, and autopilot does not stop for a death. It keeps firing on the calendar it was given. Watch the 2 calendars diverge. In one version of the week, imagine the deposits behaving the way she expects. Her own paycheck hits Wednesday. Her husband's Social Security payment arrives the first week of the month, as it has for years. His small pension deposits on the same cycle it always has. In her mind, 3 streams of income are still flowing, and even with the checking freeze, the money is at least arriving. That is the picture she is running on. Now the other version, the one the systems are actually executing. Her paycheck posts into a frozen account, arriving and immediately unreachable. Her husband's Social Security payment is scheduled, and the Social Security Administration's rule is that the payment for the month in which a beneficiary dies must be returned, even if he lived nearly the entire month. The system does not wait for her to send it back. It reaches into the account and reclaims it. And his pension, running on its own automated death verification feed, is preparing to reverse its most recent deposit, because the plan administrator was notified through the same electronic channels the bank was. Set the 2 scenarios side by side, and the gap is the whole lesson. She budgeted for 3 incoming streams. The machinery is preparing to honor one of them, freeze it on arrival, and actively pull 2 others back out. The difference between what she planned for and what the systems will do is not a rounding error. It is the difference between a household that can pay its mortgage this month and one that cannot. Here is the part that separates money coming in from money simply sitting. A frozen deposit is at least still there, locked but present, waiting for verification to release it. A reverse deposit is gone. The automated clawback does not hold the money. It withdraws it and sends it back upstream, sometimes creating a negative balance the survivor is then told she owes. A freeze is a closed door, a reversal is a hand reaching in, and the reversal machinery runs on the same accelerated clock as the bank freeze. The same electronic death registration that let the bank flag her account by Friday also notifies Social Security and the pension administrator on a comparable timeline. 3 institutions received the same signal at nearly the same moment, and each responded according to its own rulebook. The bank froze. Social Security prepared to reclaim. The pension prepared to reverse. None of them coordinated, and none of them were waiting on her. Consider what that means for a survivor who assumes survivor income simply continues. Some of it does. A surviving spouse Social Security benefit exists and will eventually replace part of what was lost. But eventually is not this week. This week, the streams she was counting on are being interrupted, reclaimed, and reversed, while the balance she could have leaned on is behind a hold. So the question for the second act is no longer about the savings sitting still. It is about the money in motion. Which of the survivor's expected deposits will be reversed before she can stop it? And can any of them be protected in the narrow window she has? The answer is unforgiving. Of the 3 streams she was counting on, 2 of those deposits would never be safe, and one of them was already being recalled. Of the 3 streams she was counting on, the one that behaves most like a betrayal is the one she trusted most. Social Security is the payment a household treats as bedrock. Federal, predictable, deposited on the same day for years. It is also the payment engineered, by rule, to be taken back the moment a beneficiary dies. And the rule is not a penalty. It is arithmetic, and the arithmetic does not care what day of the month grief arrives. Start with the rule itself, because it is counterintuitive to anyone who has never had to test it. Social Security pays in arrears. A benefit deposited in a given month is payment for the previous month. But the administration's standing policy is that a beneficiary is not entitled to any payment for the month in which he dies, no matter how many days of that month he was alive. A man who dies on the 30th is treated, for payment purposes, exactly like a man who died on the 1st. There is no proration. If he was not alive for the entire month, the payment for that month must be returned in full. Sit with the timing, because timing is where the rule turns cruel without meaning to. The payment for the month of death has, in many cases, already been deposited before the death registers, or arrives in the first days after, landing in the survivor's account like a normal deposit. She sees it. She may even count on it. And then the same electronic death signal that froze her bank account reaches the Social Security Administration, which instructs the receiving bank to reclaim the funds. The reclamation is automated. It does not ask. It reverses the deposit, and, in accounts already drained by a freeze or by ordinary spending, it can push the balance negative. Take the composite widow, the archetype, no real name attached. Her husband died on a Sunday near the end of the month. He had lived 28 of those 31 days. The Social Security payment that arrived the following week, the one she assumed was his final benefit to the household, was payment for a month he had almost entirely lived. Under the rule, none of it was hers to keep. The system did not send her a letter and wait. It transmitted a reclamation request to her bank, and the bank pulled the deposit back out. 28 days of a life he had actually lived produced a payment worth, in the end, nothing to the account. The clawback took the whole thing. Notice what she cannot do about it. There is no form that lets her keep a prorated share. There is no supervisor with discretion to release the days he was alive. The rule is categorical, and the machinery enforcing it runs faster than any appeal. A surviving spouse benefit will eventually replace part of the lost income, but eventually is a different month, and the reclamation is this week. So the practical instruction for a financially careful household is narrow, but real. Do not spend the Social Security payment that arrives in or immediately after the month of a death. Treat it as money already claimed by the system, because it is. If a survivor moves that deposit into a separate account and leaves the funds untouched, the reclamation processes cleanly against money that is still there, and she avoids the second injury. The overdraft the clawback creates when the money is already gone. The mistake is not receiving the payment, the mistake is trusting it. And the deeper point is the one the survivor is least prepared to hear. This is not the system singling her out. The rule that reclaims a nearly full month of benefits from a widow is the same rule, applied identically to every death on the calendar. It was written for the aggregate, not for her household. It does not know that the mortgage is due Friday, that the freeze has already landed, that this was the money she was leaning on. The rule is not punitive, it is just indifferent to the calendar of a grieving household. But there is a third stream, and it takes its money back through a mechanism uglier than either. A pension does not behave like Social Security, and that difference is exactly what catches the survivor off guard. Social Security answers to one federal rulebook, applied identically to every death. A private pension answers to a plan document, a contract written by an employer or an insurer, administered by a third party, governed by its own definition of when payments stop and its own machinery for taking back what it decides it overpaid. The rule is not national, it is buried in the terms of a plan the survivor has probably never read. That is the contrast worth holding. With Social Security, the widow at least faces a single known rule she can look up. With a pension, she faces whatever this particular plan decided, and most plans decided the same thing. The benefit is payable only for the months the retiree was alive, and any deposit covering a month of death or a month after is recoverable. The plan administrator, notified through the same electronic death channels that alerted the bank, initiates the recovery the way a machine initiates anything. Automatically. Without a phone call. Here is the central truth of pension reversal, and it is sharper than the freeze. A frozen deposit is still in the account. A clawback Social Security payment is reclaimed on a known rule, but a pension reversal has a mechanism the other two do not: the ACH network's right of reversal. When a payment is sent by direct deposit through the automated clearinghouse, the originator, the pension plan, retains a window in which it can reverse that entry unilaterally. It does not need the receiving bank's permission. It transmits a reversal, and the funds are pulled back out of the account they landed in, often 5 business days or more after they arrived. The survivor sees the deposit. She may see it clear, and then, days later, it is simply withdrawn. Follow the mechanism through the week. The retiree's pension deposits on its usual cycle, say the first of the month. The death is filed electronically within a day or two. The plan administrator's records update through its death verification feed. The administrator determines that the just deposited payment covers a month the retiree did not fully live, flags it as an overpayment, and originates an ACH reversal against the deposit. Because the reversal window is measured in days, not hours, the money can vanish long after the survivor believed it had settled. She budgeted around a deposit that the system had already marked for retrieval. Now layer the deposits against each other, because this is where the loop closes. Of the 3 streams the widow was counting on, look at which ones the machinery will actively reverse before she can intervene. Her own paycheck arrives, but it is not reversed. It is frozen, present, and unreachable. The Social Security payment is reclaimed under federal rule. And the pension deposit is reversed through ACH, withdrawn from an account she cannot even access to defend. 2 of her expected deposits, the Social Security benefit and the pension payment, were never hers to keep, and both were engineered to be pulled back out automatically, on a timeline faster than any letter she could send. That is the answer to the question the previous act left standing. The deposits reversed before she can stop them are the survivor income deposits she trusted most, the federal benefit and the private pension. Not because anyone targeted her. Because both institutions received the same death signal and each responded by reaching into the account to take back money the rules said belonged to a month the retiree had not lived to finish. And the pension reversal has a second edge. If the deposit is reversed against an account that a freeze or a clawback has already drained, the reversal can create or deepen a negative balance, a debt manufactured out of money that was, briefly, hers. The plan is not being cruel. It is recovering an overpayment under its contract. But the survivor experiences it as theft in slow motion, a deposit she watched arrive, quietly clawing itself back out of a vault she was locked out of. So by the end of the first week, the 2 machines have finished their work in opposite directions. The savings were frozen, and the income was clawing itself back out. Here is the objection a careful reader has been building for 2 full acts. Fine, the deceased's money is exposed to freezes and clawbacks, but the survivor's own paycheck, her own savings, the dollars she earned and deposited under her own name, surely those are untouched. She was a co-owner, not the dead party. The system flagged a dead man's Social Security number, not hers. Her money should be hers. Stillman that objection, because it is the strongest one against everything this video argues, and it deserves its full weight. In a properly separated financial life, it would be correct. If she held an account in her name alone, with her Social Security number and no other, a death record matched to her husband's identity would never touch it. The commercial verification databases run against the numbers on the account. Her solo account carries only her number, no match, no flag, no freeze. The machinery that quarantined the joint account would have no reason to look at hers at all. The objection is not naive. It describes exactly how a survivor with cleanly siloed finances actually fares: untouched, liquid, able to pay the mortgage on Friday while the joint account sorts itself out. But that is the counterexample, not the rule. The whole premise of joint titling is that she did not keep her money siloed, she merged it. The account that reads joint tenancy with right of survivorship is the account her paycheck deposits into, the account holding the emergency fund she built over a decade, the account carrying money that is, by any honest accounting, hers. And that account carries both Social Security numbers. So when the death flag matches her husband's number, it does not surgically reach the portion he contributed. There is no portion. In a true joint account, every dollar belonged fully to both, which means every dollar is attached to a now deceased person's identity. Her paycheck that landed Wednesday is sitting behind the same hold as his final deposit. Her decade of savings is quarantined against a dead man's number because she chose, on everyone's advice, to hold it jointly. Run the counterexample the other way to see the rebuttal land. Take two households, identical in wealth. In the first, the widow kept a personal checking account in her name alone alongside the joint account. When the freeze hits, half her liquidity survives. The solo account keeps working, cards clear, rent pays. In the second, everything was joint, on purpose, for the seamlessness everyone praises. When the freeze hits, 100% of her accessible cash vanishes behind the hold at once. Same money, same death. The only variable is titling, and titling decided whether she kept the lights on. So the reassurance collapses at its foundation. The survivor's own money is not exposed despite the joint account. It is exposed because of it. The feature that made joint titling attractive, the frictionless commingling of two lives into one pool, is the exact feature that lets a single death freeze the entire pool, including the half that was unambiguously hers. Right of survivorship promised her ownership. It never promised the pool would stay separable when one owner died. The machinery does not distinguish the survivor's contributions from the deceased's, because to the software, there were never two contributors. There was one account, one balance, two numbers, and now one of those numbers is dead. This is why the week compounds, instead of merely inconveniences. If only the deceased's income reversed, she could lean on her savings. If only the savings froze, she could lean on her paycheck. But her paycheck deposits into the frozen account, and her savings are inside it, and the income streams are clawing themselves back out. All of it landing on the same 7 days, driven by one signal that no institution coordinated and none delayed. Can a week be survived when both the savings and the income lock at the same time? That is the question the final act has to answer, because the trap was never any single freeze. It was their arrival on the same 7 days, Sunday, near the end of the month. That is where the composite widow's week begins. The archetype, no real name attached, and the calendar is the only thing that matters now, because every institution that will act on her money is about to act on the same 7 days. Sunday, her husband dies at home. The hospice nurse confirms it. The funeral home takes custody by evening. Nothing about the money has moved yet, and in the old world, nothing would have for weeks. She goes to bed a co-owner of a working account, believing, as her father told her, that the other one just keeps going. Monday, the funeral home files the death electronically as a matter of routine. She has not chosen a casket, she has not thought about her checking account. The single event that will freeze her cash has already happened, and she does not know it. Monday is the day with the widest gap between what she believes and what the machinery has already begun. Tuesday, the record propagates. The Social Security Administration's file updates. The commercial death verification databases her bank subscribes to ingest the fresh record. The pension administrator's feed registers the same signal. 3 institutions now know, and she is planning a funeral. Wednesday, her own paycheck direct deposits into the joint account, exactly on schedule. For one day the balance looks normal. She sees the deposit land. This is the last hour the account behaves the way she expects, and she spends it on flowers and phone calls. Thursday, the bank runs its match. A death record hits her husband's social security number, attached to an active account. The software does not read the title. It flags the account and cues the hold. Somewhere in a data center, the decision is already made. It simply has not surfaced to her yet. Friday, 3 things happen at once, and this is the compression the whole video has been building toward. The freeze posts, her paycheck, her decade of savings, all of it behind a hold. The Social Security payment that arrived for the month he had almost entirely lived is flagged for reclamation, because the rule returns the whole month regardless of the day he died. And the pension deposit from the first of the month is marked as an overpayment, an ACH reversal originated against it. Friday afternoon, her debit card is declined at a pharmacy counter. The mortgage autopay bounces over the weekend. By Friday, she is a woman who did everything right, locked out of money that is legally hers, watching income clawed back out of an account she cannot open. Now the relief. And it is real, though narrow. None of these events was instantaneous. Each ran on a clock measured in days, not seconds. The funeral home filed Monday, but the bank did not act until Thursday. The pension's ACH reversal window stretched 5 business days past the deposit. The Social Security reclamation processed against funds that were still, for several days, physically present. Between each institution learning of the death and each institution reaching into the account, there was a gap. Small, closing fast, but open. And inside those gaps is the revelation this block exists to deliver. The week was not a single trap that sprang shut on Sunday. It was 7 separate doors closing one at a time, on a schedule that could be read in advance by anyone who knew the schedule existed. The freeze was not simultaneous with the death. The clawback was not instant. The reversal trailed the deposit by days. Which means the timeline that looks like an ambush is, on closer inspection, a sequence, and a sequence can be interrupted. Monday, the death is filed, but the joint account still works, a window to move liquidity. Wednesday, the paycheck lands before the freeze, a window to redirect it. Thursday, the flag is queued, but the hold has not posted, a window to withdraw. The Social Security payment sits untouched for days before reclamation, a window to quarantine it rather than spend it into an overdraft. The widow in the composite did none of these things, because no one had shown her the calendar. That is the only reason her Friday looked the way it did. Every one of those days had a move that could have changed the ending. 2 widows. Same husband's salary, same savings, same death on the same Sunday near the end of the same month. By the following Friday, one pays her mortgage without a second thought, and the other overdraws an account she cannot open. Nothing separates them except decisions made before either was a widow. That gap, the distance between the 2 Fridays, is the number this whole story has been circling, and it can be measured. Set them side by side. Both households hold roughly the same accessible cash. Call it $18,000 in checking and short-term savings, plus a monthly income built from a paycheck, a Social Security benefit, and a small pension. That is where the identical arithmetic ends. The first widow kept the old playbook, updated for nothing. Everything joint, on purpose, for the seamlessness everyone praised. When the death signal lands, the entire $18,000 freezes against a dead man's Social Security number, her paycheck included, because it deposited into the same pool. The month of death benefit is reclaimed. The pension deposit reverses through the clearinghouse. By Friday, her reachable cash is not reduced. It is 0, with a clawback pushing it negative. Her legal net worth is unchanged. Every dollar is still hers on paper. Her operational net worth for the week she actually has to survive is below nothing. The second widow changed one thing. She kept a checking account in her name alone, funded with a rolling buffer, say 1 month of expenses, $4,000, while the joint account held the rest. She used a payable on death designation on the larger savings, so that title and access could move together instead of fighting each other. When the same death signal lands, the joint account still freezes. The clawback and the reversal still fire. Those rules do not bend for anyone. But her solo account carries only her Social Security number. No match, no flag, no hold. 4,000 liquid dollars keep working while the machinery sorts out the rest. The mortgage clears. The pharmacy card does not decline. Look closely at what that 4,000 did and did not do. It did not recover the reclaimed benefit. That money was never hers to keep. It did not unfreeze the joint savings. Those still wait on verification for weeks. It did not reverse the pension reversal. It changed exactly one variable, whether she had any reachable money at all during the 7 days the systems needed to finish their work. The old arithmetic assumed the freeze could not happen, so it left her with a buffer of 0. The new arithmetic assumes the freeze will happen, and prices in a bridge across it. That is the entire lesson in a single comparison. The liquidity gap between these 2 widows is not created in the week the husband dies. It is created in the quiet, boring months before, when one household commingled everything for convenience, and the other kept a small, deliberately separate reservoir the machinery could not reach. The death did not decide their Fridays, the titling did. And notice what this reframes. Everything covered so far, the freeze, the clawback, the reversal, described a survivor colliding with automated systems as though she were a passenger in a crash. The second widow was in the same crash. The same 3 machines received the same signal and reached into the same joint account at the same speed. She was not spared the collision. She was simply carrying money the collision could not touch. The danger of the weak is real, and none of the mechanics soften. But the size of the wound is not fixed. Two households, identical in wealth, identical in grief, identical in the death that struck them. Separated only by whether someone had built a reservoir outside the joint pool before the pool locked. The gap is not inevitable. It is a function of what was set up before the week ever began. So here is exactly what that setup looks like. Action by action. You keep one thing outside the joint pool, and the whole week changes. That is the move, stated as plainly as it can be stated, and everything that follows is just the sequence built around it. Not a mindset, not a mantra about being prepared. A short list of actions, each tied to a specific day the machinery gave you. Start with the one that outranks the rest, because it does. Keep a checking account in your name alone, funded with a rolling buffer of at least 1 month's essential expenses. The mortgage, the utilities, the food. This is not the emergency fund financial advice usually describes. Its single job is to survive the freeze, which means it cannot share a social security number with the account that will be frozen. Solo title, solo number, no death flag can reach it. If a household does exactly one thing after watching this, it is this. Now the moves inside the week, in the order the calendar hands them to you. Monday, the day the death is filed, the joint account still works. This is the widest window and the shortest lived. Whatever liquidity a survivor will need for the coming weeks can be moved out of the joint pool to the solo account while the pool is still open. Not drained to hide it, that helps no one, but repositioned, so the money that has to keep working is sitting where the freeze cannot land. Wednesday, if a paycheck or any recurring deposit is about to hit the joint account, redirect it. One call to a payroll department changes the destination. A deposit that lands in the solo account clears. The same deposit landing in the joint account an hour before the freeze is money watched, then lost. Thursday, before the hold posts, is the last chance to withdraw. The flag may already be queued in a data center, but until it surfaces, the card still works and the transfer still executes. And the Social Security payment, the one for the month of death, do not touch it. Move it, untouched, into the solo account and leave it there. It will be reclaimed. That rule does not bend. But reclaimed against money still present, it processes cleanly. Reclaimed against money already spent, it manufactures an overdraft on top of the grief. Two structural moves make the whole sequence easier. A payable on death designation on the larger savings lets title and access travel together instead of fighting each other, so the survivor is not waiting weeks on verification for money the law already handed her. And knowing your own bank's policy in advance matters because the hold is not uniform. Some institutions release a survivor's access within days of a certified death certificate. Others take far longer. The certificate itself, ordered in multiples the first week, is the key that eventually unlocks everything. Order more copies than seem reasonable. Read the sequence back and notice what it is not. It is not a way to keep money that was never the survivor's to keep. The clawback still claws. The reversal still reverses. The joint freeze still freezes. None of these moves defeats the machinery, because the machinery cannot be defeated by one household in 1 week. What they do is smaller and decisive. They guarantee that when all 3 systems reach into the joint account on the same Friday, the survivor is standing on money they cannot reach, a bridge across the exact 7 days the old playbook left uncrossed. The difference between the 2 widows was never grief or wealth or the timing of a death. It was whether someone had built the reservoir before the week arrived and then knew, day by day, which door was still open. This is education, not personalized advice. A household's own titling, state, and plan documents change the specifics, and those are worth reviewing before a week like this ever comes. Which leaves the one question the whole week was really asking. Right of survivorship is a deed to a house whose locks were changed the night the co-owner died. The paper in her hand is genuine. The title is hers, uncontested, recorded. And the key no longer turns, because the lock now answers to a different system than the one that issued the deed. That gap between the deed and the lock is the whole answer to the question this video opened with. If the money is legally hers the moment he dies, why can she be locked out of it by Friday? Because 2 machines that once moved at the same pace no longer do. The legal machine still works the way her father promised. Title passes cleanly, instantly, no court required. The operational machine, the one that clears cards and releases deposits, was rebuilt after 2011 around electronic death registration and fraud-driven verification, and it now moves in days. Ownership arrives the moment he dies. Access does not follow it. The survivor falls into the space between a title that transferred and a system that froze. Trace the mechanism one last time. A death is filed electronically within a day. Within 3, that record reaches the databases her bank subscribes to and the feeds her husband's pension and Social Security run on. The bank matches a dead man's Social Security number to a live joint account and freezes the whole pool, her paycheck included, because in a true joint account there are no halves. Social Security reclaims the month of death benefit under a rule that returns the entire month, regardless of the day he died. The pension originates an ACH reversal against its last deposit. 3 institutions, 1 signal, no coordination, all reaching into the same account on the same 7 days. The right of survivorship handled the ownership flawlessly and was never designed to handle the access. It answered the wrong question, who owns this, while the machinery asked a different one. Is the person moving this money authorized, and are they even alive? So the reassurance did not fail because it was false. It failed because it was accurate for a world that no longer exists. A world where a human being had to carry the news to the bank and could carry it slowly. Speed moved the single event that freezes a survivor's cash from the survivor's control into an automated pipeline that fires before she has chosen a casket. Everything the old playbook promised was quietly financed by weeks of delay, and the delay was engineered away for reasons that had nothing to do with her. Here is what that leaves a household to sit with. The danger of the weak is not probate, and it is not inheritance, and it is not a legal fight over the estate. Those still exist, but they arrive months later, and the law still handles them. The danger is liquidity, the ordinary ability to pay Friday's mortgage, interrupted by systems built to stop fraud that cannot distinguish a widow from a thief. The wound is real, and none of the mechanics soften. But its size was never fixed by the death. It was fixed by whether someone built a reservoir the machinery could not reach, and knew which door stood open on which day. 2 widows, identical in wealth and grief and the timing of the same Sunday death, walked into 2 different Fridays. The distance between them was decided in the quiet months before either was a widow. That is the part still inside a household's control today, while the week it prepares for is still hypothetical. This is education, not personalized advice.